The saloon doors swung open with a creak, letting in a gust of dust and the scent of sagebrush. The air inside was thick with smoke, the clink of glasses, and the low hum of drunken chatter. At the far end of the room, beneath a flickering oil lamp, sat the twins, Jesse and Cole Mercer. Identical in every way but the scar above Jesse's left eyebrow, earned in a knife fight over a stolen horse. They leaned back in their chairs, boots propped up on the table, their sharp eyes scanning the room like a pair of wolves sizing up a herd. Across from them, slouched in her chair with a smirk that could curdle milk, was Lila, the Viper Calloway. 23, blonde, and dangerous as a rattler in the sun. She'd ridden into town 2 days prior, flaunting a Colt peacemaker and a reputation for fleecing fools at cards. Tonight, she'd made the mistake of sitting down with the Mercers. The game had started friendly enough, whiskey flowed, jokes were cracked, and the stakes were low. But Lila had a tell, a tiny twitch at the corner of her mouth when she bluffed. Jesse spotted it first. Cole let her think she was winning, let her stack of coins grow fat before he dropped the hammer. A full house, kings over tens. Lila's flush wasn't enough. She slammed her cards down, her smirk faltering for the first time that night. "You cheatin' sons of bitches." Jesse chuckled, swirling his whiskey. "Darlin', if we were cheatin', you'd be wearin' nothin' but your underthings and a smile by now." Cole flicked a coin across the table. It spun, glinting in the lamplight, before landing in Lila's pile. "That's yours. For the trouble." Lila's fingers curled around the coin, her nails biting into her palm. She wasn't used to losing. Especially not to a pair of pretty-faced cowboys who treated her like some greenhorn fresh off the stagecoach. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a purr. "Or maybe I just ain't done playin' yet." Jesse's grin turned razor-thin. "Game's over, sweetheart. But we ain't the kind to leave a lady stranded." He nodded toward the stairs leading to the rooms above the saloon. "You look like you could use a place to crash. Our treat." Lila's eyes narrowed. She knew what that meant. Everyone in the territory knew the Mercers' reputation with women, generous, relentless, and never alone. But she wasn't some simpering saloon girl. She was Lila Calloway. And she didn't lose. Not really. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I ain't no charity case." Cole stood with her, slow and easy, like a man with all the time in the world. "Never said you were." He plucked a key from his pocket and tossed it to her. "Room 3. Doors unlocked." Lila caught the key, her fingers closing around the cold metal. She could feel the weight of their gazes on her back as she stalked toward the stairs, her boots thudding against the wood. The saloon noise faded behind her, replaced by the creak of the steps and the whisper of her own breath. Room 3 was small, the bed narrow, the air thick with the scent of leather and gun oil. A single window overlooked the street, the moon casting silver bars across the floor. Lila tossed the key onto the dresser and turned to face the door, her hand resting on the butt of her revolver. She didn't have to wait long. A knock, soft but insistent, rattled the door. Lila didn't answer. The knob turned, and Jesse stepped inside, his hat in his hands. "Figured you might need some company." Lila crossed her arms. "I don't." Jesse shut the door behind him, the latch clicking into place. "That's all right. We got all night." Outside, the wind howled through the empty streets, carrying the distant bay of coyotes. The saloon below was a muffled roar, a world away. In here, it was just the two of them. For now. Cole's voice, low and amused, came from the other side of the door. "Don't hog her all to yourself, brother." Jesse didn't take his eyes off Lila. "Patience, Cole. You'll get your turn." Lila's fingers twitched toward her gun. She'd been in tight spots before, but this was different. The Mercers weren't just outlaws. They were a force of nature, and she'd just stepped into the storm. She lifted her chin, meeting Jesse's gaze head-on. "You boys think you're something special, don't you?" Jesse's smile was slow, dangerous. "We know we are." The air between them crackled, thick with something more than whiskey and dust. Lila's pulse hammered in her throat. She'd come to this town to prove she was the best. But the Mercers didn't play by the rules. And neither did she. She reached for the key on the dresser and tossed it to Jessie. "Fine. But I ain't making it easy for you." Jessie caught the key, his laughter dark and rich. "Wouldn't have it any other way." Jessie didn't move right away. He just stood there, the key warm in his palm, his eyes locked on Lila's like he was memorizing every sharp angle of her face. She was all fire and edges, the kind of woman who could cut a man down with a look. But Jessie had never been one to back down from a challenge. He tossed the key onto the dresser, the clatter loud in the quiet room. "You got a mouth on you, Lila. But I reckon you got more than that." She bristled, her hand hovering near her revolver. "You reckon wrong." Jessie took a step closer, slow, deliberate. "I reckon a lot of things. Like how you ain't as tough as you pretend." His voice was low, almost a drawl, but there was steel beneath it. "How you been runnin' from something long before you ever rode into this town." Lila's breath hitched. No one talked to her like that. No one dared. But Jesse Mercer wasn't just anyone. He was the kind of man who saw through the bluffs, who knew when a woman was hiding more than just cards up her sleeve. She turned away, her fingers curling into fists. "You don't know a damn thing about me." "Maybe not," Jessie admitted, stepping even closer. "But I know you didn't ride all this way just to lose at poker." Lila whirled on him, her eyes flashing. "I didn't lose." "Not really." Jessie's grin was sharp. "Then what do you call it?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The air between them was thick with the kind of tension that came before a storm, before the first crack of lightning split the sky. Jessie reached out, his fingers brushing against the back of her hand. She jerked away, but not fast enough. "You're tremblin'," he murmured. "I ain't scared of you." "Didn't say you were." His voice was soft now, almost gentle. "But you're scared of something." Lila's throat tightened. She'd spent years building a reputation, making sure no one saw the cracks in her armor. But Jessie Mercer had a way of slipping through the defenses, of seeing what she didn't want anyone to see. She took a step back, putting space between them. "You talk too much." Jessie chuckled, low and rough. "And you don't talk enough." A knock at the door interrupted them. Cole's voice, smooth as whiskey, called out, "You gonna hog her all night, Jessie?" Jessie didn't take his eyes off Lila. "She ain't goin' nowhere." Lila rolled her eyes, but there was no real heat in it. She knew the game they were playing, the push and pull, the dance of dominance and surrender. She'd played it before, but never like this. Never with two men who seemed to know her better than she knew herself. She walked to the door and yanked it open. Cole stood there, leaning against the frame, his hat tipped back just enough to reveal the glint in his eyes. He looked her up and down, slow and appreciative, like a man savoring a fine meal. "Evenin', darlin'," he drawled. Lila crossed her arms. "You boys got a habit of invitin' yourselves into places you ain't wanted?" Cole's grin was all charm. "We got a habit of gettin' what we want." She should have slammed the door in his face. Should have told them both to go to hell. But something kept her rooted in place, something that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with the way her pulse jumped when they looked at her. Cole stepped inside, his presence filling the room even more than Jessie's. The two of them together were a force, a storm of leather and whiskey and raw, unbridled confidence. Lila felt her back press against the wall, not out of fear, but because she needed something solid to ground her. Jessie moved to stand beside his brother, the two of them a mirror image of each other, save for the scar above Jessie's eyebrow. They were a matched set, two sides of the same coin, and Lila had the sudden, unsettling thought that she was the only thing standing between them and whatever they wanted. "You're outnumbered, Lila," Cole murmured, his voice like velvet. She lifted her chin. "I like those odds." Jessie laughed, low and rough. "That's what I like about you. You ain't afraid of nothin'. Except maybe losin'," Cole added, his eyes gleaming. Lila's fingers twitched toward her gun, but she stopped herself. She wasn't going to shoot them. Not yet, anyway. I don't lose. Everyone loses sometime, Jesse said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Even you. The words hung between them, heavy and charged. Lila could feel the weight of their gazes, the heat of their bodies so close to hers. She should have pushed past them, should have stormed out of the room and never looked back. But she didn't. Instead, she met Jesse's eyes, then Cole's, and she smiled. It wasn't the smirk she usually wore, the one that kept men at a distance. This was something else, something dangerous and real. Maybe, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But not tonight. Cole's grin turned predatory. Tonight's just gettin' started, darlin'. Jesse reached out, his fingers brushing against her cheek. She didn't pull away this time. She let him touch her, let his calloused fingers trace the line of her jaw, the curve of her lips. It was a surrender, but not the kind she'd ever given before. This was a choice. Cole moved closer, his body pressing against hers from the other side. She was trapped between them, but not in the way she'd expected. This wasn't about force. It was about something else entirely, something that made her heart pound and her breath come fast. "You're playing a dangerous game, Lila," Jesse murmured, his lips brushing against her ear. She closed her eyes, just for a second, and when she opened them again, she was ready. "I always do." Cole's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with hers like they'd done it 100 times before. Jesse's breath was hot against her neck, his voice a rough whisper. "Then let's see how far you're willin' to go." The room seemed to shrink around them, the walls closing in until there was nothing but the three of them, the heat, the tension, the unspoken promise of what was to come. Lila had spent her life running, fighting, proving she was the best. But tonight, for the first time, she wasn't running. She was standing her ground. And she wasn't alone. Outside, the wind howled through the empty streets, carrying the distant bay of coyotes. The saloon below was a muffled roar, a world away. In here, it was just the three of them, the storm building, the night stretching out before them like an uncharted territory. Lila took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around Cole's. She looked at Jesse, then at Cole, and she smiled. It wasn't a surrender. It was a challenge. "All night long," she said. Jesse's grin was fierce. "All night long." The words hung in the air like the last note of a saloon piano, lingering and heavy. Lila felt the weight of them settle over the room, over the three of them. She'd spent years building walls, making sure no one got too close, but the Mercers had a way of slipping through the cracks. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't wait for an invitation. They just took what they wanted, and right now, what they wanted was her. Jesse's hand slid from her cheek down to her shoulder, his touch firm but not demanding. Cole's fingers tightened around hers, his thumb tracing slow circles over her knuckles. It was a claim, a silent promise that they weren't letting her go anytime soon. Lila should have been furious. She should have kneed Jesse in the gut and shoved Cole against the wall. But she didn't. Instead, she stood there, caught between them, her pulse racing like a wild Mustang. "You're both insufferable," she muttered, but there was no real heat in her words. Jesse's laugh was low, rough. "And yet, here you are." Cole's free hand reached up, his fingers brushing against the back of her neck. "Admit it, Lila. You like the attention." She rolled her eyes, but her breath hitched as his fingers tangled in her hair, tilting her head back just enough to meet his gaze. "I like winning." "Then let's make a deal," Jesse said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You spend the night with us, and we'll call it even. No hard feelings. No grudges." Lila arched an eyebrow. "And if I say no?" Cole's grin was sharp. "Then we'll just have to keep a skin." She knew they weren't bluffing. The Mercers didn't bluff. They played the long game, wore a person down until they got what they wanted. And right now, Lila wasn't sure she wanted to be worn down. Not when the alternative was giving in. She let out a slow breath, her eyes flicking between the two of them. They were so alike, yet so different. Jesse was all fire and sharp edges, the kind of man who burned hot and fast. Cole was smoother, his charm like a slow, sweet poison. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. "Fine," she said, her voice steady despite the way her heart was pounding. "But I ain't making it easy for you." Jessie's grin was wolfish. "Wouldn't expect nothin' less." Cole's hand slid from her hair down to her waist, pulling her closer. "Wouldn't want it any other way." The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with the scent of leather and whiskey and something else, something electric. Lila had been in tight spots before, but this was different. This wasn't about survival. It wasn't about proving herself. This was about something she couldn't quite name, something that made her stomach twist and her skin hum. Jessie's hand found her chin, tilting her face up to meet his. His lips brushed against hers, soft at first, then harder, demanding. Lila didn't pull away. She met him kiss for kiss, her fingers curling into the front of his shirt. Cole's hands were on her waist, his touch grounding her even as Jessie's kiss sent her spinning. When Jessie finally pulled back, his breath was ragged, his eyes dark. "Damn, Lila." She smirked, her lips swollen from the kiss. "Told you I ain't easy." Cole chuckled, his hands sliding up to her ribs. "No one said you were." He turned her toward him, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was slower, deeper, like he had all the time in the world. Lila melted into it, her hands gripping his shoulders as Jessie's lips trailed down her neck, his teeth grazing her skin just enough to make her gasp. The night stretched out before them, endless and full of possibilities. Lila had spent her life running, fighting, proving she was the best. But tonight, she wasn't running. She wasn't fighting. She was standing her ground, and for the first time, she wasn't alone. Jessie's hands slid down her arms, his fingers intertwining with hers. Cole's kiss was relentless, his touch sure and steady. They moved together like they'd done this 100 times before, like they knew exactly what she needed before she even knew herself. Lila broke the kiss, her breath coming fast. "You two are something else." Jessie's grin was lazy, satisfied. "We know." Cole's hands found her waist again, pulling her back against him. "And now you do too." The night was far from over. The saloon below was still alive with music and laughter, but up here, in this small room with the two most infuriating, charming, impossible men she'd ever met, Lila felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt alive. Jessie's lips found hers again, his kiss slow and deep. Cole's hands slid up her sides, his touch warm and sure. They moved together, a tangle of limbs and laughter and something that felt dangerously like surrender. Lila had spent her life making sure no one got too close. But tonight, she let them in. She let them see the cracks in her armor, the parts of her she kept hidden from the world. And for the first time, she didn't regret it. The wind howled outside, carrying the distant bay of coyotes. The saloon below was a muffled roar, a world away. In here, it was just the three of them, the storm building, the night stretching out before them like an uncharted territory. Lila smiled against Jessie's lips, her fingers tightening in Cole's shirt. She'd come to this town to prove she was the best. But tonight, she wasn't thinking about winning. She wasn't thinking about losing. She was thinking about the here and now, about the two men who had somehow slipped past her defenses and made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. She was thinking about the night ahead. And for the first time in a long time, Lila Calloway wasn't running. She was right where she wanted to be.